Okay, guys, this is Reza here with a presentation for you. It's METCON versus HIIT versus circuit. What's the difference? I have decided to create this presentation not only for clients but for PT friends as well. I think we have at some point of time of our careers dished out some kind of circuit training program, and our clients now their knowledge is getting better and better. So they would have asked us, hey Reza, what's the difference between metabolic conditioning? What's the difference between that, high intensity interval training, and also circuit training? It all looks the same to me. So what's the difference? So I think if we've been asked a question one time round, we don't have the answer, that's okay. But we have been asked the question a second time and a third time, and we don't have the answer for them, that's not okay. That's not responsible as a trainer. So I hope this presentation will be helpful for you as a client, as anybody who's exercising, and also as a trainer. So let's get on with it. All right. So this process of uh, uncovering the differences has improved my understanding of these programs here. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, before we start, we want to ask the question why? Why do any of this at all? So the primary thing that people love to do this high intensity programs is essentially this thing called EPOC. All right, so it's the excess post exercise oxygen consumption. So essentially EPOC is what we call in the fitness world the afterburn effect. So most people, when they do circuit training or HIIT or any of this thing, the assumption would be that, hey, I'm doing this so that my body can burn more calories even when I'm resting. Okay, so now the question here would be, how much more uh, calories am I burning afterwards, and how does it impact our fat loss program? Okay, so it's pretty significant if you take a look at it in totality. So EPOC, as we know it earlier on, it's called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. All right, what it does, it heightens your oxygen consumption. So this is just a bit of added knowledge. The body expands 5 calories to burn 1 liter of oxygen. So the moment you are required to take in more oxygen throughout the day, you're expending more calories. So that's why this is very important for all of us who look towards managing our body composition, and in terms of fat loss reduction, it's good to be doing some kind of intense activity 3 times a week. The whole idea is we want to be burning more energy at rest. So by how much more? This is a huge gap. You can see it's between 50 to 200 kilocalories more per day. So there's a lot of variable factors here, which includes your age, your gender, your activity level, your health level. So even if you look at it at the middle point of this estimation, it's still 100 calories a day, and 100 calories a day in a week, that's 700 calories a day, which is pretty significant. Just remember that 3500 kilocalories is zero point 0.5 grams of body fat burn. So if you're on a calorie deficit, any little thing, it will help with your training program. Now, what it does, it also adds 6 to 15% of total energy cost per exercise session. So assuming I've done a high intensity program yesterday, and today I'm doing a low intensity program, a typical strength training program, that I'm taking a lot more rest between sets, it still adds another 6 to 15% of total energy cost per exercise session. So it's beneficial. There's a huge carryover effect to your next session. Okay. Now, the next benefit that we look towards in terms of doing such high intensity programs is this thing called metabolic stress. So, what is metabolic stress and how does it affect our body? Okay, this is one of the key things that help us with muscle growth. All right, so the 3 keys to muscle growth is mechanical tension. All right, meaning the load that we are receiving on the body. Next is this thing called metabolic stress and muscle damage. Okay, that's through eccentric rep training. So let's see what metabolic stress is about. All right, metabolic stress for us is key in helpful for us for muscle growth. It's basically that pump that we feel on our body, all right, when we do the slightly moderate rep ranges within 6 to 15. We're working towards volitional or technical failure. Okay, so the higher rep range above 15 is also good as long as you work towards that volitional failure. So metabolic stress is about working through the reps, feeling the pump, all right, and accumulating all that additional byproducts inside our muscle, which we'll talk about later. All right, and one of them is actually lactate, which helps with our energy production and also muscle growth. Alright, here are a few definitions before we actually move forward. So again, we get these questions about, yes, I know metabolism is about my body burning energy in terms of my metabolic rate, right? So all of us have a X amount of metabolic rate. Let's assume at rest we are expanding for an average Asian male, maybe 1,600 kilocalories a day in your 30s or so. Alright, but what truly does metabolic means? Let's take a look. Alright, metabolic means is relating to the metabolism, the whole range of biochemical processes that occur within us or any living organism. Alright, metabolism consists of both anabolism, the building up of substances, and catabolism, the breakdown of substances. So, those of us that have grown up in the late 90s and early 2000s, where we were taught a lot about bodybuilding programs, the word anabolic is good, and the word catabolic is bad, because catabolic means I am losing muscle, but it's not that. So the concept of this is actually a process that occurs within the body. For example, when you eat, all right, and that digestion and the breaking down of food, that's the catabolic process. And as your body digests and breaks down all that proteins into amino acids and builds it up again for our muscles and for repair, that's the anabolic process. So our body is consistently going through this process of catabolism and anabolism. All right, so the only time that we will possibly maybe be losing muscle is when we are overtraining and not eating enough, and therefore we go into a catabolic state, meaning more catabolism versus anabolism. So if we're doing things well, we're taking care of your health well, eating well, then we should be in a positive build-up state in the body. But it doesn't mean that catabolism is bad. It's just part of a natural occurring process in the body called metabolism. All right, now specifically within the fitness industry, especially when we talk about metabolic, is often used to refer specifically to the breakdown of food. And for this case, in terms of the fitness industry, as I mentioned, is the transformation into energy. So when we talk about metabolism, metabolic rate, we are always talking about how much energy we are consuming at rest or with energy expenditure through activity. So I will provide my research links in the description below in this video, so you can do your own research. All right, so a lot of this information is up to you to dig it up, and when you create that effort, this knowledge will be yours, totally yours. All right, now we move to the next thing. What are metabolites? Because when we work out, there's stuff that gets produced, and they are the things that linger around in your muscle cells, and these things are called metabolite. So a metabolite is basically a substance made or used when the body breaks down food, drugs, or chemicals, and it's usually in its own tissue, for example, fat or muscle tissue. This process, called metabolism, makes energy and the materials needed for growth, reproduction, maintaining health, and also helps to get rid of toxic substances. So as we work out, we normally hear that we want to have lactic acid clearance, right? So those things right now are still being debated, because the word lactate and lactic acid are being used very loosely. They are actually quite different in how it affects the human body. What's produced in our muscles under high intensity activity is actually lactate. It's just one proton difference before it fully becoming an acid, right? So that will probably be put into the description below for you to understand a little bit more about what's lactate, what's lactic acid, and how it affects the body. But assuming there's excess accumulation, the body will have to get rid of this. All right, it's through the liver, and it gets out through the body. Okay. All right, so what's the common denominator in all this kind of high intensity training, metabolic conditioning, and circuit training. So as soon as we move into the higher ranges of our intensity level, 75%, 80%, 85%, 90%, lactic accumulation will be more prevalent in the muscle. That's how we think that because of that accumulation we get sore. Alright, so now this is not new. It's been around a long time in the endurance training world for runners and cyclists, but recently, not recently, maybe since CrossFit took dominance in the fitness world from about 10-15 years ago, they started using these terms a little bit more. And essentially what they're doing is they're doing lactate threshold training with weights instead of just cardiovascular type activity. Alright, so lactate, commonly called lactic acid, is a normal byproduct in the body and is instrumental in fueling during intense activities. During workouts, the uncomfortable burn in the muscle isn't from lactate, so this is what I mentioned earlier on, but likely from the hydrogen ions resulting from the drop in the body's pH. Now you can read about this on several well-researched articles, okay? So commonly we think that sour feeling in our Asian language, that sour feeling in the muscle, that deep sourish feeling, the uncomfortable feeling in our muscles when we get into that high intensity workout moments is from lactic acid. It's probably not. It's likely from the hydrogen ions, alright, resulting from the drop in the body's pH, alright. So whenever you use carbohydrates, a significant portion is converted to lactate. This is when we are talking about anaerobic glycolysis. So when we are doing high intense activities, we do not use oxygen. We use carbohydrates as a source of energy. Alright, and this lactate also is used in the same tissues as fuel and is transported to other tissues via the bloodstream and used for energy. So lactate actually helps us perform better. So as soon as we recognize which training zones we are training in, so that's the reason why specifically I would make reference to CrossFit and other endurance activities where, especially CrossFit, it's interesting with CrossFit that they used heavy Olympic movement as well as part of their endurance training. That's amazing. So the human body is truly capable of doing quite a lot if you train it to be. Okay, so they have effectively used this lactate threshold training to make better athletes. All right, so let's move on, and now we can really dig in. All right, I just mentioned CrossFit. He is one of the most famous CrossFit athletes we all know. His name is Matthew Fraser. So if you look at their work output, it is tremendously amazing. Okay, so let's take a look a little bit more about when they call their training METCON. What is METCON? Metabolic conditioning. Alright, so as mentioned earlier, METCON was made popular by CrossFit, say over the last 15 years at least, maybe 2005 or slightly earlier in 2003, and then due to the expansion of the internet and the CrossFit Games, I think 2009 onwards, it got really, really huge, okay? But the term is not new. The term was first used by Arthur Jones, those fitness dinosaurs like myself, as my friend Nuno likes to call it. Um, Alright, and those that have grown up in the 80s and maybe in the 70s, you will be very familiar with this equipment called Nautilus. Alright, so Arthur Jones is the inventor of the Nautilus equipment in 1975, and he's the first person to actually use this term metabolic conditioning. Alright, he defined it as the ability to work at a high level of intensity for a prolonged period of time. The ability to work at a level very close to 100% of intensity for a period of at least 20 minutes instead of 1 minute previously considered possible. So here's the key thing. There is again a definite period of working. So for metabolic conditioning, again, it's about working to a high degree of work effort and sustaining it for that 20 minutes or slightly above 20 minutes. Now let's take a look what really defines a metabolic conditioning workout. High intensity, based on Jones' definition, workouts need to be at a maximum sustained effort, 7.5 to 8.5 out of 10 perceived exertion. That means your heart rate is at least 85%, 75 to 85% of your maximum. Rest can be fixed, such as a 30 seconds rest between rounds. So rounds can mean your circuit of exercises. Like for me, I might do a round of say 6 exercises or a round of 8 exercises, and each exercise I go for a bout of 30 seconds and I keep going. Or it can be variable depending on when the athlete feels ready to perform a complete set of the next exercise with proper form and range of motion. Here's the key thing: we want to take a look at movement that do not deteriorate easily. So we need to keep those movement patterns simple enough, yet we can do things at a high work rate. So if your form deteriorates, range of motion deteriorates, then you are at a risk of very bad injury. So METCON style workouts are usually done as a weighted circuit, but can include single modality activity like running, rowing, biking. It can include calisthenics, gymnastic movements, or a combination of all these things. So as you can see within the CrossFit world, they do a lot of weighted circuits. Even it's with a Dynamax ball, that's a weighted ball. So we're using barbell work, dumbbell work, kettlebell work. All this is weighted, and they use total body movement, huge compound movements that will at any point of time involve the hips, the legs, the shoulders, and arms. Okay, so this is what causes the intensity of the workout to go very, very high. Duration is within that 20 to 30 minutes. So this will be a common denominator in most of the workouts that you see here. Alright, HIIT, high intensity interval training. So you can see the background picture, it's like a spin class. Alright, so um, now let's take a look specifically at the definition of HIIT. What makes HIIT different than the rest? Alright, so HIIT training, high intensity interval training, has been around again for a long time and can be referenced back to Roger Bannister, the first person to run a sub 4 minute mile, and his 400-meter repeats with specific rest between each run. Sorry, I forgot to put the date to Roger Bannister here, which year. I'm quite sure it's probably maybe in the 50s or 60s. I should put an update on the year where he made this reference. But in recent times, as we all know, this has become really, really popular in the past 2 decades plus by some research done in '96 by Professor Izumi Tabata. So a lot of us trainers will be familiar or at least heard of this thing called the Tabata regime, the Tabata circuit, the Tabata program. Okay, so this began with Professor Tabata when he trained the Olympic speed skaters on a cycle ergometer. Basically, that is a stationary bike that can give a readout of the energy output of the athletes. And then he required them to maintain an intensity which is super high at 170% of their VO2 max. That is crazy intense. I put there, it's a similar feeling to go for an all-out sprint for 20 seconds. So how many of us can go for an all-out sprint for 20 seconds? And then do that for 7 to 8 intervals with 10 seconds break in between. That's tough. So again, HIIT, to be strict in its actual programming, not all programs that say HIIT are really HIIT because the definitions is really very narrow. So again, what defines a high intensity interval training workout? This is what we see most often happen, that the heart rate will be 80% of maximum heart rate or 8 out of 10 rating on your perceived exertion. Here's the next thing that defines HIIT. It has fixed periods of rest or active recovery. This will be dictated by the protocol you are following to reach a specific goal. For example, decreasing rest times each week between your 500-meter repeats on the indoor rower in order to achieve a specific 2K 2000 meter time goal in the future. So you need to have that fixed periods of rest. Just like the Tabata protocol earlier on, you have that fixed periods of 10 seconds rest between sets of 20 seconds. So HIIT must have the fixed periods of rest in between. Alright, typically the HIIT, they are done with single modality cardiovascular based activities like running, rowing, biking, swimming. So if you're true to the HIIT definition, you will be doing mostly cardiovascular based activities, not so much of weights, not so much with, let's say, squats, lunges, but stuff dealing with your running, rowing, biking, and swimming. However, there are no rules that say that you cannot, so therefore, in most boot camps, in most gyms, commercial gyms, even small boutique gyms, they will involve workouts. They may use dumbbells, kettlebells, body weight, squat movement patterns, lunge movement patterns, upper body movement patterns, compound movements, even during their HIIT training. So again, they have taken the definitions a little bit more loosely than what it was intended to. And here we go. We have finally circuit training. Alright, circuit training has been around again for a long time. Alright, circuit training. In 1953, Great Britain, two researchers took their own personal interest in fitness into the laboratory. Their goal is to discover the best way to produce holistic fitness. That is the kind of fitness applicable to both aerobic and anaerobic activities. This led R.E. Morgan and G.T. Anderson to create the first breakthrough study on circuit training following their research at the University of Leeds. So you guys can go read up on this stuff. So again, they have a certain protocol to follow. Let's take a look. So what defines a circuit training workout? Typically, in the original format, 9 to 12 stations comprise the circuit. I remember this clearly when we first set up circuit stations in California Fitness, in Bugis Junction, in Raffles Place. So we were able to use the live fitness equipments that had the elastic resistance bands within the machine. That was quite interesting. And yes, we did put about 9 to 12 stations over there. So each participant moves from one station to the next with little or no rest. So here, the original system was only about 15 to 30 seconds rest in between, and then they performed a 15 to 45 second work bout of about 8 to 20 repetitions at each station. Now look at this, their initial protocol, using a resistance of about 40% to 60% of one repetition maximum of your 1 RM. So that means circuit training overall, if following the original protocol, is of a much lower intensity level. So this program is suited for most people. Alright, so how do they all connect? Let's take a look. Let's summarize. Let's finish this thing. Alright, METCON. It's a sustained high level of activity for 20 to 30 minutes. Could be a circuit, could be HIIT, or any number of activities, usually with weights. HIIT, it is the most narrowly defined of the three. HIIT workouts are done at the highest energy level possible, which is your 90%, 9 out of 10 perceived exertion, with predetermined rest intervals throughout. So here's the key thing. You need to have the predetermined rest intervals for it to be called HIIT. A HIIT workout can be both a circuit and or a METCON, usually with cardio type exercises. So if you want to stay true to the HIIT protocol, it's got to be cardio style exercises. And finally, the broadest and loosely defined program is the circuit program. So the broadest term is your circuit. That simply means completing exercises in a circuit one after another. A circuit could be set up as a HIIT or METCON, or even at lower intensity levels at 6 out of 10 perceived exertion. So there guys, here we go. So for trainers, we should be able to explain this to our clients a little bit clearer and make them understand a little bit more the differences between these three major programs that has been circulating for the past 10-15 years, but sometimes we don't know how to explain it clearly. There's probably not enough information out there. That's the reason why I decided to do this presentation for you guys and for all of my clients to understand it a little bit more. So again, just a quick once over. METCON, you got to use weights, high level of workload, 20 to 30 minutes, you may be going continuously for 6 to 8 exercises maybe, and then rest for 30 seconds to a minute or so, and then carry on again, and ensuring that you're able to do it with good form and workout. Now, good form and technique is a prerequisite for all three of these program. Okay, so if your technique deteriorates to the point where your body is just slapping on the floor, you're just bouncing off, and you're just moving your knees forward and pushing your knees way out, heels are lifting on your squats and all that stuff, so it's time for you to stop and reassess whether can you actually take such high intensity levels for your exercise program, or you cannot. If you can't, slow it down to the broadest term, or broadest a definition of this kind of program, which is a circuit, and just slow things down and do things much lighter. So a simple circuit program could comprise of, let's say, maybe a squat pattern, a lunge pattern, a push-up pattern, which is a chest press, maybe a lat pull down, all right, a shoulder press, a horizontal row, all right, maybe some abs, some sit-ups, some core, a basic plank, and do it real slowly, and move on from one to the next, one to the next, one to the next, and just work it at your comfortable 60% or 6 out of 10 perceived exertion. So that should keep you safe. So maybe as an entry level client where you're first starting out to work out, I would say look at the basic circuit programs and work at a lower intensity level, and move your way up maybe to a HIIT once in a while, to a METCON once in a while, till you get more familiar with how you're moving your body, till you get more familiar with using weights. Then you can use those other programs. Okay guys, so I hope this presentation has been helpful for you. This has helped me tremendously understand these three programs by just doing the research on it. So if anything, you got any questions, just put it down in the comments below. Drop me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I'll be able to help you guys out. Alright, so thank you again. Alright, please like the video if you like what you've seen. Share it with friends and family. Share it with your colleagues. And subscribe to Get Fit with Reza for more good stuff. So again, thanks for watching guys. Thank you for being with me. Have a good Sunday. Have a good week ahead. Thank you very much. God bless and have a good day.